Greetings, friends. Kambria Evans here with the Zero Disturbance Podcast. And y'all, we are winding down our latest series, Dumb Things Therapists Say. And it has been a joy for me to think with you about all the lifelong learning we get to do, not just as therapists in our practices, but as a client, understanding that we can empower ourselves to kind of check what's happening in the therapy room. Am I using my agency? Am I using my understanding of what treatment could look like for myself? And this isn't to shame anyone or make anyone feel bad, but mostly to kind of highlight some of the blind spots that we have as therapists, just because of the way that we've been trained or the things we've been taught by people who came before us. So I hope this has been an enlightening, thought-provoking series for everybody, whether you're a therapist or a client. And today we're talking about the topic of forgiveness. And I can't tell y'all how many times I've had a client here on my couch in California telling me that previous therapists have forced them or forced on them this idea of forgiveness. Well, you just have to forgive them, right? Or an even dumber saying that therapists say, just forgive and forget. If you are a therapist who has said this, if you are a client who have heard this, you are not going to want to miss today's episode because I'm going to deconstruct why saying this is not only dumb, but also harmful and traumatizing for people in the therapy space. And I'm going to offer some alternative options that might feel more respectful, might feel more empowering for both the therapist and the client. I think that when we tell someone what they need to do to feel different or better, we are infantilizing our clients. And I really come from a place here in my office with my clients of letting them lead where they're going to go. I had a woman in my office last week, and she was thinking about this concept of forgiveness. Should I forgive my perpetrator? And if I do that, will I feel better? Is that for me? It's really interesting as an EMDR consultant and a brain spotting practitioner for me to see the choices people make when it comes to this question. And there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to illuminate the places where we don't want to get in our own way. Okay? So what is this concept of forgiveness? Well, this concept of forgiveness if you can understand why or understand the trauma this person might have had that would make them do this, or if you can just, forgive them because it was wrong or a mistake, like whatever the narrative is. I want to talk about the impact on the person who is being tasked with the emotional labor of forgiveness. First of all, that's not fair because they didn't do anything wrong. And I find what's most helpful in my practice is not me as the clinician guiding my client towards forgiving their bully, their abusive husband, their perpetrator, right? It's not so much about that person. It's more about my client being able to understand, oftentimes, especially when I'm working with women, is what's mine and what's theirs. A lot of women are told, well, that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been in that parking lot by yourself. That wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been wearing that. That wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had 3 glasses of wine. That wouldn't have happened if you hadn't said yes to that date, right? So very oftentimes women are shamed for their choices. Very oftentimes women are told that they are the reason they were hurt. And for a woman who's had that experience after being assaulted, for then the therapist, which is supposed to be a safe person, to say to them, well, you have to forgive them. Can you see what we're doing to women in these situations? It is more abuse. It is more traumatic for them because what we're doing is we're inviting them to internalize the belief of, I should have, or it's my responsibility to, right? What I like to do instead with my female clients is to assess and see if we can find any places or parts of them where they feel I should have, or if only I had, or I'm stupid because I should have known, blah, 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 blah. A lot of the work I do with my female clients in particular is learning to forgive themselves and pushing away this BS narrative that after you've been hurt, you are supposed to have to then give your perpetrator something energetically, forgiveness. Now, I've heard the narrative that forgiveness is for them. Forgiveness is for the client because it allows them to let go and feel lighter and not carry the anger. Now, I want to agree with a part of that narrative, which is, of course, I want my client to feel lighter, to feel more empowered, to feel safer. Any therapist trained in any decent way is going to understand at a basic level that anger is protective. It is very, very understandable and normal for someone who has been bullied, assaulted, or hurt to feel rage. And I love seeing the rage. I love finding the rage in women because what that tells me is that there is an opportunity for safety within her because anger is protective, right? The energy of rage tells us that there is a part of her that knows I am worth protecting. That is not okay. And my anger is coming in to protect the part of me that is hurt and vulnerable and scared still. So I agree with the goal of let's help the client feel safe. I do not agree with this assumption that the way for you to feel safe and calm and connected to self is through forgiving your perpetrator. I don't agree with that. Now, does that work for some people? 110%. But if you are a client in therapy who is trying to figure out how to put your life back together after somebody has hurt you, I want you to hear me say that you are not responsible for forgiving anybody that has hurt you. It's not your job. That is not your emotional labor task to complete. Now, if you have a part of you that is telling you, I'm stupid, I should have, it was my responsibility to, right? Or I shouldn't have, that is the part I would want you to focus on. If I had a magic wand and you were sitting on my couch and we were going to do some EMDR around this, that is the part I would want both of us to go be with, to help that part understand it's not your fault. It is not your fault. And for people who have been victims to have a part of them tell themselves, well, you're stupid or you didn't do this, it's just more abuse. It's just more pain, right? So this idea of forgiveness is interesting because it depends on who we're forgiving. And for me in my office, it starts with forgiving the parts of self that had this idea that they were supposed to know differently, right? Or maybe they did know differently. Maybe they knew I'm not supposed to go in the parking lot at night. It's not safe. And something happened, right? Let's say a part of you knows that. Does that make it your fault? No, it doesn't make it your fault. If women are going out to a bar and there is the thought or the understanding that I might have something put in my drink, is it then that woman's fault that she knew better? I'm using air quotes for those of you listening, but it still happened? No, it's not her fault, right? So working on forgiving the parts of self that tell ourselves these things, this for me is where people feel the most unsafe because they don't trust themselves anymore, or they blame themselves and they carry that yuckiness with them that doesn't even belong to them. It doesn't belong to them. It's not theirs, never was. What I really want for my clients is to feel safe and to trust themselves. And once they've internalized that feeling after something traumatic has happened to them, maybe where they thought they were going to die, their life's never going to be the same now, they have a different trust of the world and in other people. I always want them to have the home base of, I trust myself to take care of myself. I trust myself to learn. And I trust myself to know that if someone chooses to hurt me, it's not my fault. And the rage that I feel about this, I'm not ashamed of that either, right? I want people that come and work with me to understand the beautiful intention and power of the energy of the rage, the protectiveness, and taking that and helping them feel safe. And when we desensitize a traumatic event with bilateral stimulation or brain spotting here in my office, right? I never, ever, ever introduce the concept or task of forgiving the perpetrator. It's fascinating to me how people land in different responses to what's happened to them. I've had someone process a stalker, and she landed on, I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to have a gun in my house. I didn't see that coming for her in this processing session. And that is where she landed. And that's what I respect, right? I have done processing sessions with people where they've decided, you know what? I'm going to forgive that person because then I'm in charge and they don't have the power anymore. And I'm going to let it go. And that works for them, right? But I want all therapists and clients to hear me say this. No therapist should be forcing forgiveness onto you as part of your process. You are able to heal without that step if that's what works for you and your situation, right? I want to say a couple words too about this idea of like forgiving and forgetting, because this is just one of the dumbest things therapists say. If y'all have been watching this podcast at any point in the podcast, you understand that I talk quite a bit about neural networks and neuroscience and how the body keeps the score. Now, what does that mean? It means that when things happen to us that are upsetting, traumatic, even positive, right? Our body keeps these neural networks encoded like a program, like a computer program, telling us if this, then this, then this, then this, right? There's an algorithm that's created. We take in information, right? Something happens, and then we decide, how does our body feel? How does our emotion feel, right? What is our response or urge to that thing happening? And then we get these deep neural networks, these grooves that help us, or they want to help us. And so how can we, as people that understand that this happens, also let the words come out of our mouth, forgive and forget? Because even if we think it's appropriate to task somebody with the emotional labor of forgiveness of someone else, the forgetting part, it isn't even a reasonable task to invite someone to do. Because what is forgetting traumatic events? Well, it can be protective, I suppose. You know, we are biologically built to dissociate, to separate, to take a break from hard things. But can we really put it away? Can we really take something and kind of spiritually bypass and say, well, I forgave them, so I should feel this way, and I'm going to take this horrible thing this person did to me that I did not deserve, and I'm going to forget it. I'm going to put it away. But guess what? Your invitation to dissociate from what happened is an invitation to dissociate from yourself, from your mind, from your emotions, and from your body. Now, is the intention a good one? Yeah, it's great. I wish we could forget stuff sometimes, but guess what? I wouldn't have this job and have a wait list, right, as an EMDR therapist, if people had the ability to actually forget, to actually put it away, and not have it stored in their body as IBS, migraines, jaw grinding, right? Panic attacks, nightmares. The list goes on and on and on, okay? The body remembers. There is no putting it away. This is clear now. So what happens when people say forgive and forget is we're asking the victim to forgive their perpetrator, giving them more tasks, and then we're saying just forget. Just dissociate, disconnect from yourself. And here's the problem. When we ask someone to focus externally on the perpetrator instead of self, meaning forgiving the parts of self that tell themselves things like, well, I should have known better, or I'm stupid, right? Or I should have. That's the real forgiveness, in my opinion. When we tell someone also to forget something, what we're actually doing is we're disempowering them. And here's why. I just did this really incredible intensive training this last weekend. Y'all know I shared in the last episode that I'm doing a training on psychedelic-assisted therapy. And I'm doing this year-long program. It's with psychiatrists, physicians, nurse practitioners, other therapists, because I want to learn about all the tools available to people who come into my office. This lecture that I saw this weekend was so fascinating, talking about the effectiveness of mood stabilizers, right? Wellbutrin, Lexapro, things for depression, things for anxiety, and how the medical model in the 90s, when all these drugs came out, all the psychiatrists were so excited. They're so excited to have the answer and the cure. And what's really interesting is that these drugs take the edge off. And what do they do? They suppress feelings of anxiety. They suppress feelings of depression. And then what does that do? It allows you to exist as you are in the current reality. Now, what do psychedelic-assisted therapies focus on? Well, these medicines, right, actually do the opposite. They increase your neuroplasticity in your brain, which means they actually take the parts of the brain that usually talk to each other, right, and increase the communication between those parts of your brain. Now, this actually increases sensitivity. It actually increases your emotions. It actually increases your desire to go towards hard things. It doesn't suppress for you to just get through your current reality. It actually creates connections to name what is real and what is true. And doesn't disconnect you like dissociation. It actually connects more the areas of your brain. How amazing is that? Why is that important? Because what we're noticing with the research, with these medicines that increase the neuroplasticity, right, can actually increase joy, feelings of agency, feelings of power, feelings of connectedness in a way that mood stabilizers don't and can't for most people. So this idea of forgive and forget, it doesn't make sense. It's an outdated idea. And I don't know what year this saying was invented or coined as like part of what we should do in therapy. But I'll tell you something. It was probably before EMDR. It was probably before we could even have an open conversation about the possibility of psychedelics being used in therapy room. It was probably before mood stabilizers came on board, right? Because there was nothing available to us, really, except just getting through it with talk therapy. And times are so different now. They are so different now. And thank God, this is a really exciting time to be a therapist. It's a really exciting time to be a client in therapy. So why am I talking about this? Because, again, I can't tell you how many clients come in here and tell me that they've been tasked by other therapists to forgive or forgive and forget. Maybe it's something that like they read in a book. Maybe it's something that like their family member had told them. But I can't tell you how many trainings I go to as a therapist. I heard this weekend with a therapist actually saying her therapist told her to forgive and forget, that forgiveness was forced onto her, that forgetting was forced onto her. Now, it's not 1990. We are not stuck in this model of suppress, forget, dissociate, disconnect from yourself. Because if we disconnect from ourselves, we actually become less powerful and less safe, which is not the feeling we want to have, especially after a traumatic event. What do we want to say instead of forgive and forget? Well, I'm so glad you asked. What I say to my clients is, I am so sorry this happened to you. You did not deserve this. And my job and commitment is to be with you until your body feels safe again, to be with you until you feel compassion for what you have gone through, And if there are any parts of you that are beating you up about what you should have done or what you should have known, we're going to give attention to those parts to help them understand they did the best they could. And they are good. And we can still trust you. We can still trust you to figure things out. We can still trust you to keep yourself safe to the best of your ability. We're not throwing you away. We're not disconnecting from you because this happened to you. We're not going to allow that because that's the real wreckage, right? That is the real aftermath of this kind of bullying or assault from a perpetrator, okay? Does it matter this person's relationship with the perpetrator in terms of forgiveness? Not really. Whatever the internal model is, right? Oftentimes with EMDR, it kind of just resolves it. Oftentimes what I'll see when I'm reprocessing with people, traumatic events or assaults, their perpetrator actually shrinks in size in the target image. It's amazing. The perpetrator actually becomes farther away instead of up close, right? The picture of what happened goes from color to black and white, or goes from really, really loud to completely quiet, muted, like with a TV remote, okay? Your body with EMDR and brain spotting knows what to do when it comes to forgiveness. It knows what to do with what works for you, what gets you to the most adaptive place for you in terms of your safety internalized in yourself, which is you're feeling powerful and you trust yourself, okay? So if y'all are a therapist watching this and you have a consultation group and someone said something dumb about forgive and forget, feel free to share this with them. I would love for them to have a listen and open their mind a little bit. If you have a supervisor who's pushing this on you to tell your clients, let them have a listen as well. I would love to hear from them if they have any comments or thoughts about what I'm saying. And if you're a client in therapy who has been working through something really traumatic, I want you to know that I am so proud of you, that what you have been through is something that not a lot of people openly talk about. And unfortunately, it is something a lot of people understand. And I want you to know that you can get through this. The worst part is over. And your only job in therapy is to make sure that before you leave that therapy room, before your treatment plan is done, that you feel safe in your body again, that you reclaim your body and reclaim your trust in yourself so that you can actually experience yourself in the world the way that you would like to, or close enough, because you deserve that. And we don't want anyone to take that away from you. It is not theirs to take. So y'all, it has been empowering to talk about this, especially as a woman. And I hope that anyone listening to this feels seen and understood from this conversation. Y'all know I love getting really thoughtful about the way things work in therapy and the way things work in our body and in our minds and in our hearts. So thank you for being curious with me about that. And I will look forward to seeing y'all next time on the Zero Disturbance podcast. In the meantime, be well.